皆さん、こんにちは。Welcome back to Mango series on the Japanese writing system. In our last two episodes, we covered hiragana and katakana that represent 46 basic moras or units of sound in Japanese. Today, we are going to learn why some of these characters can appear with marks that looks like quotation marks or tiny circles on them. We'll learn how these tiny symbols are used to represent additional Japanese sounds and what voiced and semi-voiced means. では、始めましょう。Let's look back at the message you saw in episode 1. 最近、ペットボトルなどのゴミのポイ捨てが目立ちます。In this sentence, these highlighted characters have a pair of short, parallel lines at the upper right corner.And these highlighted characters have a small circle instead. These tiny marks are a pair of ingenious devices used to represent voiced and semi-voiced sounds in Japanese. Thanks to them, you don't need to learn any new hiragana or katakana. Let's learn how they work. Each of the sounds in these four rows start with k, s, t, or h. They are seon or unvoiced sounds. They are called unvoiced because you don't use your vocal cords when saying them. K, s, t, h. Now, this mark is called dakuten or a voiced sound mark. When we add the mark on the upper right corner of this hiragana, they signal that these consonants are now voiced. G, z, d, and b.For example, ka becomes ga, sa becomes za, and ta becomes da. Now, when we add the mark to ha, it becomes ba. It's just another unique rule to memorize for Japanese. Here is a chart for dakuon.or voiced sounds. Let's go through them together. Starting with the first row, we've seen that a dakuten changes ka to ga. So, ki with a dakuten will become gi. Let's read the whole row. Ga, gi, gu, ge, go. Let's see how it works in real words. ここ means here. If we add a dakuten to both hiragana in this word, it becomes gogo. Now the word means afternoon. The next row may look slightly irregular in Romaji spelling. This is shi, and with a dakuten, it becomes ji. So the whole row goes za, ji, zu, ze, zo. Let's look at an example. Nishi with a dakuten becomes niji. It means rainbow. The third row also looks a little irregular in Romaji spelling. Notice that chi with a dakuten is pronounced just like ji in the row above. Likewise, tsu with a dakuten is pronounced the same as zu.Let's read the row together. Da, ji, zu, de, do. Here is an example with one of the kana from this row. Tenki means weather. With a dakuten, it becomes denki or electricity. Finally, in the fourth row, if ha becomes ba, then hi becomes bi. So the whole row is ba, bi, bu, be, bo. Here is an example. Han becomes ban. And here is an interesting one. Hannin means a criminal, but with a dakuten, it turns into bannin, a guard. As you can see, adding a little Dakuten to hiragana can transform the meaning of a word completely. Now, only for this row of ha, hi, fu, he, ho, we can add a tiny circle instead of a Dakuten like so. It signals that the H sound has turned into P sound. So, now, ha, hi, fu, he, ho becomes pa, pi, pu, pe, po. This sound is called handakuon or semi-voiced sound in Japanese. The tiny circle is called handakuten. Semi-voiced sounds often appear in onomatopoeia that imitate sounds and mimetic words that imitate movements, actions, and other attributes. Let's read some examples together. Pata pata. This is used for a pitter-patter or a flap-flap sound. And pika pika, which conveys that something is shiny. We can also use the same rule of dakuten and handakuten on katakana, representing the same voiced and semi-voiced sounds. Let's finish by practicing some English words that are used in Japanese and written with katakana. Can you guess what each means? Bank. It's a bank. If we change the dakuten to a handakuten, it now reads pank. It's short for puncture and is a Japanese term for flat tire. This one has two voiced sounds. Visa. Visa. And if we change it to slightly, it becomes pizza. That's how Japanese people say pizza. You can find voiced and semi-voiced sound charts for hiragana and katakana on our Mango website in the language learning resources area, along with other resources like useful phrases with native speaker audio. Mango's Japanese course is also a great place where you can read and strengthen your katakana and hiragana knowledge. You can find more fun words like these in Mango's Japanese specialty unit called Mimetic Words. どうもありがとうございました。じゃあ、また。